Yes, I would like to get a moisture meter or water activity meter for my coffee, but I have no idea where to start. There are so many devices out there and I don't see the differences. If this is a question that you have, then this video is perfect for you, because here we're going to compare some moisture meter for coffee and some water activity meters from coffee. I'm Ingo from Roastables, and now let's go. Measuring moisture and water activity in your coffee is extremely important if you have a coffee roastery or a green coffee trading business. It's also something that a lot of home roasters are interested in, but it's mainly important if you're then really professionally working with coffee. Why and what this exactly is something that I have explained in detail in the video that you find right here. In this video, I'm not going to get too much into the background or the explanation of these values. I'm just going to show you some devices with which you can measure moisture content in your coffee as well as water activity in your coffee. So here we have 5 devices. Here we have the CoffMeter M1 device, which is measuring moisture content and density of your coffee. Here we have the Lighttells MD-500, which is doing the exactly same, measuring moisture content and density in your coffee. And for all the devices that are measuring moisture content and density, you can use it for either green coffee beans, but also if you're, for example, a coffee producer, you can also use it for the whole cherries, for parchment, or you can use it for roasted coffee. Just in the practical use, it's mostly used then for green coffee beans. So this you can do with these 2 devices. Here we have the OMIX Plus from DiFluid, which is measuring moisture content, density, but then in addition to that also water activity, and besides of that it also have measurements for then the color of your roasted coffee. So it's an all-in-one device that you need for your roastery. And here we have the other 2 devices that are then just measuring the water activity in your coffee. It's the Lighttells AW-600 and the CoffMeter W1 device. Let's get a bit in the technical details how these devices are working. So when it comes to moisture content in your coffee, you have 3 ways to measure it. You could either take a sample, put it in an oven, which is 105 degrees Celsius, and then wait for a couple of hours. Like in general, you're using then 24 hours, and after that you're measuring again the weight of your coffee because all the water is out, and then you have a very precise measurement. But that's super unpractical, so nobody is actually using this method. It's only a method that some of these manufacturers are using then to calibrate the device. And then when it's coming to more practical uses of measuring the moisture content, it's all methods that are then indirect. So you're not directly squeezing out the water and measuring how many water is inside. You're doing then an indirect measurement method. There are 2 methods that you can use for that. One is resistance, so electrical resistance, where you have 2 probes, then you measure the resistance between. But this is something that is not working for coffee, because in coffee you have a lot of minerals and crystals. So this method is not working for coffee. The method that is working for coffee is the so-called capacitance. And there you're then measuring the electrical load, and from that you can then extrapolate with algorithms how much water is inside. And this is the method that all of these devices are using. They are then calibrated to the temperature, so you will see when you're working with these devices, they're then also measuring the temperature of the coffee and extrapolating that, and therefore you also understand that sometimes there are a little bit of measurement differences between all of the devices, because it's not a direct method, it's an indirect method. Also, what's important for all those devices is that you're regularly calibrating them, because especially then they're also extrapolating the weight of it. So you know with all these devices you can also measure the density, so they have also a weight measurement, and therefore it's important to calibrate all of these devices regularly so that you get a good and consistent result in measuring. And then when it comes to water activity, there are 2 methods that are working here. And here, to be honest, I need to use the help of my AI in order to explain you how it's working. So I'm taking my phone here where I've written it down for you. So there are 2 methods. One is the relative humidity, which is being used by the Lighttells AW-600 as well as the CoffMeter W1, which is a relatively easy to do methods. So this is a little bit of a cheaper method to manufacture. And then in the DiFluid OMIX Plus, you have then a method which is called the chilled mirror dewpoint method, which is something that is usually used in professional devices. And here they found a solution to do this in a really compact method. And I will now explain you how this is working and what are the differences between that. So let's get into relative humidity. What is happening here? So imagine placing your coffee sample into a small sealed chamber, and then the sample starts to release water vapor out into the air, so in this little chamber. Over time, the air absorbs more and more water until you find a balance point or an equilibrium. And at that equilibrium, then it's stopping to release water, and you can then measure indirectly the water or the humidity, which is correlating to the AW of your coffee. And the Lighttells AW-600 has two ways of measuring it. You can then either do the longer method, which is really waiting until the air is saturated, and then you have the super precise measurement, which is taking about 20 minutes, or you have a shorter measurement, which is taking 6 minutes, and then it's extrapolating it from the time. But in practical use, these measurements are quite the same. So in practical use, in my experience, you can then really take the quick method. If you're measuring quickly, like in about 6 minutes or 20 minutes, usually the results are really close to each other. And also to remind you, it's then really big differences that we are talking about. So when you're above 0.7 or even higher, then you have critical issues with your AW. And when you're below that, even the small differences of 0.01 doesn't make a big difference. Therefore, I can recommend you to use the quicker method, which is working perfectly with the Lighttells. Then, interestingly, with the CoffMeter, you're even faster. So the CoffMeter is only measuring 2 minutes, and it's actually not waiting until the whole sample is saturated. It's dynamically measuring the rate of the evaporation, and then with that, it has an algorithm that can calculate how much it will be when it's fully saturated. It's working quite well. I mean, we will do then a live test with it so that you can see the differences. But in my experiences, then the results for these two devices are quite the same. So here you have a quite fast method. If you need to do a lot of samples, in the Lighttells it takes about 6 minutes, or if you want to be super precise, as said, 20 minutes to measure it. And then for the DiFluid OMIX Plus, as said, you have a little bit of a different method of measuring the AW, which is the so-called chilled mirror dewpoint method. And here I also need to read it for you to explain it then properly. What is happening here is that inside the sealed chamber, there is a small polished mirror, and an electrical cooling element is chilling this mirror down until the point where then water vapor is building these little vapor spots on the surface, and you have then an optical sensor which is measuring that. So imagine if you're cooling down a glass of water, at one point you have this little then condensation at the outside. This is then happening with this mirror, and it's measuring the point or the temperature where this is happening, and with that it can then extrapolate with algorithms the water activity of your coffee, and that's a very precise and also quite fast method of measuring it, so it just takes a couple of seconds, and this is then the way you're measuring in the OMIX Plus device. So all in all, when you have these devices here, to give you the basic functions of it before we go into details and then are doing a measurement with each of these devices, here you have the CoffMeter M1, which is measuring moisture and density of your coffee, green coffee beans, whole cherries, parchment or roasted coffee. Same here for the MD-500 from Lighttells, also moisture content and density of your coffee for green coffee beans, cherries, parchment and roasted coffee. In the DiFluid OMIX Plus, you have the same. So you have moisture content and density, green coffee, parchment, whole cherries and roasted coffee. In addition to that, it has an optical sensor which is also measuring screen size. It can then give you an extrapolation of the real density. When it comes to density, then have a look at this video here where we really deep dived into the topic. It's measuring water activity with this chilled mirror dew method. And in addition to that, it's also then measuring the color of your roasted coffee. So it's then a device that is really covering all the needs of a coffee roastery. Here we have Lighttells AW-600, which is just measuring then the water activity with this relative humidity method. Same here with the CoffMeter W1, which is measuring the water activity with the relative humidity method. And now we are going to have a look at each device and are doing a measurement for each single device. Good. So let's start with the first unit, which is the CoffMeter M1 unit. We are going to start it up. You see it's taking about 4 seconds to be started. Then when we have a look at the unit, you can see here we have some settings, like we can work on the Bluetooth connection, choose the temperature unit, so have Celsius or Fahrenheit, choose the language, screen brightness, and how long it takes for auto power off. And then you have a density calculation correction mode. You just take the basic mode here. And you have device information, factory reset. So here you see then, for example, the firmware that you have on it or connect it to your app. Then here we have a history. So we see the previous measurements. You also have a beautiful app where you can connect it to, which is called then the CoffeeOS app from DiFluid. There you then have the measurements as well. You can do here a calibration, which is actually nothing that you do anymore with the newest firmware. So before they then gave you samples for calibration, but meanwhile they changed the firmware in a way that you're just going to zero the unit, and with this zeroing procedure then the unit is calibrated. So that's what you're doing meanwhile. And now we are going to prepare the sample. So CoffMeter is giving you this little tool then to evenize the beans up here. I don't really manage to work really well with this tool. What I usually am doing is I'm preparing the sample in that way that I'm going to take the coffee, which is here, by the way, our beautiful Brazilian Fazendas Dutra coffee. So coffee for everybody. It's some beautiful chocolate nut notes, high quality from Brazil, organic from Fazenda Dutra. That's so much about that. Now I'm going to overfill the sample with coffee. If you want to be on the safe side, you can even overfill it a bit more. And then you are going to put away the beans that are higher than this rim, so that it's then really even and you don't have any beans reaching over the top of the device. It's really flat. And what you are going to do now is we are going to test, and I'm going to run my watch so that you can see how fast it's going to take to measure. So start testing, and now you see it even took less than 3 seconds to give the result. And here we have 10% of moisture content, a density of 678 grams per liter, temperature is 23.1 degrees Celsius. You can do another test, gives the same values. And so, like that, you can test then the density and the moisture level of your beans easily on the CoffMeter M1. If we want, we can do another sample so that we know if we measured it correctly. That for putting the beans back. It's very helpful to have a little plate below so that the beans are not spilling all over your table, because then it's really nice to have enough beans and overfill it a bit so that you can nicely prepare your sample. So put all the beans in here. Do the leveling procedure again. And measure once more. See again, 10% moisture content. And that's it. That's the way the M1 is working from CoffMeter. Next unit is the MD-500 from Lighttells. So let's switch this on as well. It's also taking not too much time to switch on, a couple of seconds. You're going to be welcomed by this warning that you need to empty the bucket. Just make sure there is nothing inside. Then confirm this. And then you also have a menu where you see a history, so what you've measured before. You can choose the bean type, green, parchment, white cherry, roast, same as with the M1. You can do then a calibration procedure, and this calibration procedure is working that way that you first make sure the bucket is empty. Did that before. Then you load the weigh, so put this one on it, then it knows how much weight there is. Now it has been calibrated and the machine is ready to run. You can reset the machine, switch when it's going to power off, temperature scale, Celsius or Fahrenheit, how the time is being displayed, and now we are in the measurement mode. So we are going to prepare the sample now. And in case of the Lighttells, you will get here this cup. And it's super important that you're not going to lose this cup, because if you do so, then you're going to have an issue, because this is then really perfectly calibrated that you get the right amount of beans in the device. So take this one, fill it with beans. Also again, you get a little ruler. Take all the beans that are over the rim, put them in the chamber now. And what you're going to do now is you're going to release the beans in the chamber. And then you start the measuring. I'm also going to check how long it's going to take. So you see about 4 seconds. Then you have the moisture content, which is measured by the Lighttells now 8.8% of moisture content. Density, it says 771 grams per liter. If you have a look at the videos we did previously on moisture meter, or like on density, then you will see that there is a calculating factor. That's why you have differences in grams per liter. Temperature, green, that has been measured. We do another measurement. There's again 8.8% moisture content. I'm going to prepare another sample. I have my cup, overfilling it with beans again. Even it out. Put the beans back in. And now we get, again, this 8.8% moisture content, 782 grams per liter density. So this is the way you're measuring then moisture content and density with the Lighttells MD-500. What we got here is the DiFluid OMIX Plus, which is then really a tool that has all the functions that you need in a coffee roastery. I'm going to switch it on and then also measure how long it's going to take to switch on. So you see, it's taking about 12 seconds and then the unit is ready. And when we go in the menu here to this first page, then you can see measurement, which is then the most important place. Here you are going to do your measurement. You see you can measure moisture and density, water activity, and roast color. So it's also a roast color analyzer. Then when we're going back to history, we can see the previous measurements. In settings, you can do quite some settings because it's now a multifunctional tool. So in first place, you can look what kind of sample is it? Like, is it going to auto-detect, find it himself? That's usually the function you can leave because the tool is quite good in that. Is it dried cherry, parchment, green beans, roasted beans, or ground coffee? Then environment. This I usually leave on, so is it going to take then the environmental factors into consideration, like temperature, pressure and all that? That totally makes sense. Water activity, is it going to measure water activity all the time, or do you have to measure it manually? I leave this off because water activity takes a bit more time to measure. So if I just need moisture content and density, I leave it off. Roast, so here you have then different possibilities for setting when it comes to measuring the roast color, but there is actually a detailed video where we talk about this. I'm not going to talk about this in this video now, so have a look in our description to find the video on roast color meters. Then temperature unit, Celsius or Fahrenheit. Then here you have some general settings. Do you have the Bluetooth on? Also, DiFluid OMIX Plus has connection to the DiFluid app and also to the CoffeeOS app. I recommend you to play around with these apps because sometimes they have even more functions or nicer viewings of the measurements. Auto power off, when is it going to power off? Language, so you have then here English, some Asian languages and Spanish. Screen brightness, and that's more or less it. Here you have some device info and then also the QR code to connect to your app, and you can do a factory reset. So before we are going into a measurement, we are going to do a calibration, and there is one or calibration or procedure that you usually do when working with it, which is the so-called initialize container procedure. So you have different containers. The ones you are using for green coffee is usually container A. So then you need to initialize it so that it knows how heavy this is, and then it can measure how many grams of green coffee beans you have put in. But there is then another calibration which we are doing from time to time when measuring water activity, and this is then the water activity calibration. For water activity, you are going to prepare a sample, so you get everything you need for that in your delivery. Just what you are adding is then salt, just normal salt, and distilled water. Then you shake it, leave it for a couple of hours until then the water is saturated with the salt. And then you can use this liquid for calibration. You just need to do it once then, and then you can reuse it. So we are going to put this liquid in here until everything is covered. So put it in the device, put the cover on, and then we are going to do a water activity calibration. I'm going to measure how long this is going to take. So the procedure is taking about 22 seconds, and now the unit is ready. You're going to take this out. As I said, you can reuse this, so put it back in your little bottle so that you have the calibration liquid. And now you are going to prepare a sample. So first thing, again, just to make sure, initialize the container. Then fill it with green coffee beans. Again, here with the DiFluid, you would have this part to then even out the beans. And also here, I just prefer to take the beans, really take enough of them until they're spilled over. Use the ruler that you get with your device, the nice DiFluid ruler, to then even out the sample. When it's flat, just make sure you don't have any holes or so. So, sample is prepared, put it in the device, put the cover on, and then I'm going to the measurement tab, and I'm also then going to measure how long this is going to take. So I press on test with moisture and density. So you see that takes about 2 seconds to measure moisture and density. Here I can see 10% moisture content in the coffee, 774 grams per liter is the density. If I go in here, I see, because the machine has also then a camera, so it's optically measuring the beans. You can see the screen size, the average diameter of your coffee beans, then also true density, bulk density. These are values that we had a talk very deeply then in the last video. So have a look at the density video, which is then also linked in the comment. So this is it for that, moisture and density. And now for water activity, we are doing the same. Just press on test. I'm going to measure the time so that you see how long it's going to take. So you see, it took about 30 seconds. And as you might remember from the video before, or like from the first part of the video, this has been then the chilled mirror method to measure it. And I got a water activity of 0.613. We can actually then do another sample just in order to make sure that we get consistent results. So I'm preparing the sample again. Go again to measurement, moisture and density, 10.1% moisture content, water activity. So you see the measured water activity is 0.618. So all in all, the measurements within this device are quite consistent, and this is the way you're measuring moisture, density and water activity with the DiFluid OMIX Plus. So the next device here is the AW-600 from Lighttells, which is a measurement tool to measure water activity. And differently from the OMIX Plus, it's measuring relative humidity. We are now switching the device on. So it takes around 3 to 4 seconds to be ready. Then what you have here is a menu where you can go into settings. In settings, you can set the date, time, and then here, this is something I talked about before. You have two modes. One is then an equilibration mode. This is taking about 20 minutes for the measurement, and here it's really waiting until it's fully saturated. Or you can use the quick mode, which is taking about 6 minutes, which is a bit faster. And you can give it a try here. In my experience, the values that are coming out from quick mode and equilibrium mode are really nearly the same. Therefore, I prefer to go with the faster 6-minute mode. You can then go to metric or imperial. So we go to metric scale. You can set how precise it should be. So I put it on 0.001. Power off, when the power is going to be off. You can clear the log, you can reset the unit. That's what you have in settings. Then in the log, you have the previous measurements, which method it was, what value you had, temperature. So this is what you can see here. And then information on the device, like hardware version, software version, some technical information. And that's more or less it. What you then can do is also, now I forgot about this point here, you can do a calibration. So calibration is being done similarly to the OMIX Plus. You also take this saturated liquid, put it in this little cup, you put it then in. I'm not going to do it now because I just did it yesterday, and it's taking about 20 minutes because it's really then doing this long, precise measurement. So it takes about 20 minutes for calibration. Calibration is nothing that you have to do every day, but just from time to time so that the unit then is calibrated. Now it's ready for the first measurement. What we are going to do here is taking one of these plastic cups that you get, putting some beans in. Doesn't really make a big difference how much you put in. Then fill it in the unit, put the cover on, and start it by pressing the red button that is on here. I'm also going to start measuring how long it's going to take. And now we just let the unit run for, I said plus minus 6 minutes. Let's have a look. After 6 minutes, the measurement has been finished. It measured 0.548 in water activity, and I'm going to set up the sample again so that we can see how consistent it is in reading. So we wait for another 6 minutes, and then we have the second result. So we made the second measurement and it came to 0.550. It's about the same water activity value than we had before in the first measurement. So in it, it's quite consistent, but we have seen that the values it measured between the Lighttells and the DiFluid OMIX are a bit different. That's coming mainly also then from the way it's measuring. So here, the relative humidity in the OMIX, we had the chilled mirror method. So this is the way you're measuring water activity with the Lighttells AW-600. So here is the last unit in this test, and it's actually the newest unit on the market of all of them that we had here. This is the CoffMeter W1, which is measuring water activity. I'm now also going to start this unit. See, it's taking about 2-3 seconds to be started up. And what you can see then in the menu where you can swipe to is calibration measurement. We are going to have a look at calibration quite in a minute. Then here you have the previous measurements. You can actually also connect this tool to the CoffeeOS app from DiFluid. Then settings, device information, Bluetooth connection, status bar. So if you see then in testing how the status is, temperature unit, language, display brightness, when it's going to be auto off, so factory reset. These are the settings that you have here. Now when it comes to calibration, you are doing the procedure the same with all the other water activity devices. So preparing this solution of salt and distilled water, putting them in this little sample tray. By the way, quite nice one, so you can take this out by turning it. It's a magnetic one, nicely solved by DiFluid CoffMeter. You put in the liquid, and now we are going to do a calibration and check how long this is going to take. So calibration took 5 minutes. Now the device is ready. As said, you don't always have to do a calibration. That's just something that you do from time to time. Now we are going to take the liquid out. Then we are going to fill some green coffee in this little cup. Doesn't really matter how much you put in. So put it on top. Then we are also going to measure how long it's going to take. So we go on measure and then start the test. So took about 50 seconds and landed at 0.57 in water activity. So a value quite in the middle between the OMIX Plus and the Lighttells AW-600. I'm just going to do another sample to see then how consistent it is. So take it out. Prepare a new one. Just put in some of the spins. Chup, chup, chup. Start the test. So here the second measurement landed at 0.564, so quite in the same range of 0.57, 0.56. This is the way you're measuring then water activity on the W1 by CoffMeter. I hope this video was helpful for you. If you're interested in any of these devices, then head over to our website, rosetravels.com. You find the link here or down there in the description. We will find all of them. We have free shipping in Europe. We have a service center in Europe. And also, if you're looking for any coffee roasting equipment like sample roasters, small coffee roasting machines, or green coffee beans in smaller amounts, books, courses, any other equipment on coffee roasting, or if you have a particular question on coffee roasting, then always come back to me. You'll find everything on our website, rosetravels.com.